Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Cherish Jones, and it's my privilege to serve as your worship associate today. If you've been looking for a congregation where your doubts are respected, your griefs are comforted, your joys are celebrated, concerns are shared, reason is honored, and your need to serve others is fostered, then perhaps you have found your home. Welcome to Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Happy Father's Day. I'm fortunate to have a husband who is the best dad to our 2 kiddos and 3 great dads of my own, my dad, my stepdad, and my father-in-law. As we continue our month's topic on compassion, I am reminded of one of the most compassionate people I have ever met, my stepfather, Bruce. At a young age, he found out he was unable to have children of his own. But oh, his heart and mind were made up to help children no matter what. And he adopted 2 baby girls, my now stepsisters. I grew up in a very, very small town in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado with my mom, my dad, and my 2 brothers. It was about 10 years after Bruce adopted his 2 girls that he met my mom, and our families were merged. The winters often got extremely cold and snowy in my town, and one winter, Bruce realized that each day he drove us home from school, he would pass a small house where a young 2nd grade boy, Ryan, sat in the driveway every day. So one freezing day, Bruce stopped with the 5 of my brothers and sisters in the car and picked up Ryan too. He brought him home with us, where he had a warm dinner and my mom dried his frozen boots. Well, the sheriff came by. He turned out to be the town drunk, but that's a story for another Sunday. He heard the situation and he got Ryan. Bruce, picking up Ryan, made the proper channels aware that every day he waited for his mom to come home, but she didn't come home till 5. So Ryan would sit in the snow for 2 hours. Good news was that they received help and everyone was okay. The next year, Bruce met Freddie. Freddie was a 1st grader who started coming to school in the same torn clothes every day and never took a bath, ever. So Bruce brought him home with us. And he too had a warm dinner and got some new clothes. And as you guessed, the sheriff came by looking for him. Turns out that Freddie lived in a tent with his dad deep in the forest. His dad was unemployed, doing the best he possibly could. Once that this was discovered, the town found his dad a job and a decent place for he and Freddie to live. You know, Bruce, the sheriff said, perhaps you should go about becoming a foster parent and going about these things the proper way. And Bruce did. But you see, it never was even a thought in Bruce's head that what he was doing was perhaps not the proper way. Yes, he was probably not going about it the best way, but he saw a child in trouble and he always helped them. Always. And it continues to be that way to this day. He has the absolute most compassionate heart that I've ever met. If you're a Facebook user, please be sure to check in and tell your friends what a wonderful congregation we are. Now, would you please take a moment to turn off your phones and other devices that might be disruptive during our time together. Also, to maintain a contemplative atmosphere, please hold your applause until after the postlude is finished and the service is completed. We are a welcoming congregation and we extend a warm greeting to any newcomers. We invite those of you who are visiting for the 1st or 2nd time, if you're comfortable doing so, to please stand and introduce yourselves so we may have the opportunity to get to know you. Hi.
I'm Oakley and my wife Linda, and we're visiting you from
Welcome. If you are new, we invite you to stop by the greeters table to pick up an informational packet. We invite everyone to please join us after the service for conversation and refreshments on the patio. If you've been coming for a while but are not yet a member, and you feel that you have found a spiritual home here at Tapestry, please talk to the minister, a member of the membership committee, or someone at the greeters table about becoming one. We heartily welcome everyone, so now please extend a greeting to old and new friends sitting near you. It's great seeing everyone connecting with each other. You can continue your conversations over refreshments after the service. This Sunday, we pause to celebrate all the birthdays in our community. We'll have cake after the service on the patio. Now would you please stand or raise your hand if you're having a birthday this month, Let's all sing happy birthday to our wonderful UUs. Happy birthday. Coming up at Tapestry. Today at 12 p.m. here in the sanctuary, we have a special guest who will lead an informational presentation and discussion on Alzheimer's and dementia. This is a free event and a light lunch will be served. You can find information about this and other upcoming events in your order of service or on the website. Our various groups and events reflect our vision of being a transformational home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic community leader in Orange County and beyond. And now Linda Yergin will light our flaming chalice, the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and give back. May we know that once again, we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to the community, and to each other. Please join me in saying our covenant, followed by our song of affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation and the service to its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another.
We turn our minds and our hearts again toward the Spirit of life, source of renewal. May we be awakened here to the mysteries that humble us, the realities that orient us, the truths that sometimes judge us and guide us, the beauty that enfolds and enravishes us, the love that nurtures us, and the fellowship that sustains us. May we be awakened, so that we may give ourselves in honesty and in openness to the larger life before us. Welcome to our time of community, our time to worship together. Welcome to Tapestry. If you're comfortable doing so, would you please stand and join me and the choir in singing our opening hymn? It's number 347, Gather the Spirit. As we gather and worship on Sundays, we pause to lift up the joys and sorrows in our community and in the world around us. Some of us do that by lighting a candle in silent recognition of those milestones, and some of us want to share a message. So this morning, we only have one message to share. It's a very exciting message, and it is that Caitlin, that's our Director of Religious Education, and Garrett, her husband, are expecting their second child due January 12th. And Amelia is thrilled to be a big sister. Congratulations, Caitlin. Would you all please join me in reading the congregational response for that message and for the joys and sorrows that rest in all of our hearts? For your joys, we join you in celebration. For your sorrows and concerns, may you feel our compassion. And now for our young and young at heart, if you want to come join me up here on the carpet, I have a story. Good morning. So I picked this picture for this morning's story. Can someone tell me what this is a picture of?
It's over there.
It's up there on the wall. I see a hand over there, yes? Perhaps. Actually, they're living in China. I think they're actually Tibetan by origin, though. Any other ideas? Why are they wearing those robes? Because they're monks, that's right. So the reason I picked this picture today is in honor of Father's Day. One of the things that we don't often remember about monks is that they often join a community of monks from a very young age. So this picture includes a very young boy and some older monks, and they all work together and learn together and grow in their religious life together. So sometimes older monks end up being sort of a father figure to these younger monks who are with them in their community. So a happy Father's Day to our monks. Yes, there is one little monk. So the story I have for you this morning is called The Monk and the Scorpion. As was his early morning ritual, the monk went on a walk to meditate. He walked from the monastery to the pond that he liked, and he walked with great mindfulness. With every 4 steps, he slowly breathed in, and with the next 4 steps, he slowly breathed out. The rhythm of his feet and his breath kept his mind centered, and he simply walked with this great attention to everything that surrounded him. And he was grateful for the beauty that he saw, the colors and the smells as he walked, as his robes blew in the breeze. Finally, he got to the pond that he liked to sit by, and he sat there on a large rock under a weeping willow tree at the edge of the water, and he closed his eyes and began to meditate. And even though he was deep in meditation, he heard an unexpected sound that he hadn't heard before. Plop. The monk stood and he looked in the direction of the noise, and he saw right by the water's edge a scorpion splashing around in the water where it had fallen off a low-hanging branch. And without pausing to even think about it, the monk walked over to the pond and he knelt down and reached out his hand and he gently scooped out the drowning scorpion from the water. What do you think happened? It stung him. Yes. So passing by, watching this odd scene, there was a much younger monk who became very curious what his elder was doing, getting stung by a scorpion. So the monk lifted the scorpion out of the water only to get stung, and he was so startled that he dropped the scorpion right back into the water. Plop. And the scorpion began thrashing around because he couldn't swim. So the monk reached his hand into the water again to save it, only to be stung again by the scorpion. Plop. Sting. Plop. Scoop. Sting. Plop. The monk was beginning to feel the effects of this venom throughout his body. And the young monk who was watching couldn't help being quiet any longer. He said, "What are you doing? If you keep trying to rescue that scorpion, you're going to end up in the water yourself." And the older monk looked at his young counterpart and replied softly, "Thank you for your concern." And he reached into the water one more time. Although the scorpion stung him again, he was finally able to drop it on the dry ground, and the scorpion scurried away. The monk returned to his stone where he liked to sit, and he said to the young child monk, "Please understand that that scorpion meant me no harm. It was simply its nature to sting me because it felt threatened. It was afraid. We all act out of our nature, and I've been practicing loving compassion for many, many years. My nature is to be compassionate. The scorpion couldn't stop what it was doing, and neither could I." So there ends our story, but I wanted to bring that story to you guys because it reminded me of why we come to Tapestry. We come here to learn to act with love and compassion too, just like the monk, so that when we face challenges in the world, we have the courage and the strength to do what is right. But it takes lots and lots of practice. Ooh. So we come here and practice together. Go now in peace. If you would turn with me in your hymnal for our responsive reading. This morning's reading is called Impassioned Clay, and it's number 654. Fortunately, Vernie caught a typo in our order of service this morning. It's 654 is the correct number. So I'll read the words in regular print, and you will read the words in italics. Deep in ourselves resides the religious impulse. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, or self-derived.
We have religion when we hold some hope beyond the present, some self-respect beyond our failures.
We have religion when our hearts are capable of leaping up at beauty, when our nerves are edged by some dream in the heart.
We have religion when we have an abiding gratitude for all that we have received.
We have religion when we look upon people with all their failings and still find in them good. When we look beyond people to the grandeur in nature and to the purpose in our own heart.
We have religion when we have done all that we can, and then in confidence and trust ourselves.
On Father's Day, we honor those people who have been teachers, confidants, and friends. We acknowledge that it's not necessarily biology that makes a parent, but love and affection. For those of us who have lost a father or a child, we hold their memories in our hearts. For all of us who are fathers, we ask for continued help in discerning how to best care for our children, whether they are 5 or 50 years old. May the strands of relationships between ourselves and all of creation grow even stronger. May all of us, no matter what our place in the cycle of life, experience nurture and love. And may we pass on that love to those we encounter on our own paths. Let us join together in a short time of silent meditation. Namaste. Amen and blessed be. This morning's sermon is a little out of the ordinary. It's much more inward focused than usual. By inward, I mean in this room inward. That's partially because last week was our annual meeting, so we've been thinking a lot about budgets and missions and all of that. It's also partially because of where I am, what I've been studying and reading for the past couple of months. Tomorrow morning, I'm leaving for a couple of weeks to attend class. I'm working on a doctorate of ministry, and the class that I'm going for is in ecclesiology. It's one of those insider words for sure. Ecclesiology is the theological study of church. It's basically the theological underpinnings of why church even exists. What's its mission? What's its unique purpose? And reading in preparation for the class has been especially timely since we had our annual meeting last week. We've tried to measure our successes and our challenges, and we've tried to prioritize our budget. Those aren't easy questions when you're doing more than making money. And we're beginning to cast some vision for our future. They're hard questions. What is it that we aim to accomplish as a liberal religion? What's our mission here as Tapestry, beyond what's printed on your order of service or what's on our website. And it's good to know from this reading that we're not the only ones wondering what our mission is as a congregation. Every other religious community is doing the same thing. I promise you. Even churches with much more black and white theology struggle to understand their unique role as a church in the world. Now, there are several different measuring sticks of what a church should be. They come out of history and theology and sacred texts. So I wanted to share with you a few of those descriptions of mission, and I'm sure one or two of them will probably resonate with you. Sometimes we see our community as an institution. It's a collection of material resources and challenges. It's a building, or a rented space perhaps. It's staff, it's volunteers, it's a budget, it's an organizational history and a calendar and publications. And of course, those things get expanded as you look at a national level and neighboring Unitarian Universalist congregations and their offices and bylaws and budgets and meetings. When you add it all up, it becomes a pretty colossal institution. That's one way of describing what the church is. Now, the opposite approach is seeing religious community as the sort of intangible sentiment that glues together the whole project. Instead of material goods, we might think of church as a community of relationships, friendship, compassion, kindness, and curiosity. Part of that network is individual relationships with God or the divine or what have you. Measured against that goal, church succeeds when it's a manifestation of loving, compassionate community. That didn't come up in our budget talk, did it? But what about the outside world? For a lot of people, the mission of religion is to be a herald, to proclaim the good news to as many people as possible. The mission is to spread a life-affirming message of faith. And we know our evangelical Christian neighbors understand that as their mission. Unfortunately, I hear that sometimes derided here at Tapestry. But some of us here also think that Tapestry, as a liberal faith, has a liberating message to share with as many people as possible. A message that folks in southern Orange County are starving for. Some of us want to share our faith and what it's meant to us. Other people want to go out into the world not to preach but to serve. They see our true religious calling as service. For them, the church doesn't exist to lead the way, but to respond to what is, to offer help and healing wherever it's found. One of these things is probably what you came to Tapestry for in the first place. Maybe not church as an institution, but maybe church as a loving community, or as offering a different message to the world, or a way of serving others. It may be why you came to Tapestry, and it's very probably what you want to see Tapestry doing more of. And that's okay. Other people are going to their religious communities for the exact same reasons. I guarantee it. There are endless ways of justifying those different models, and each of them are valid. A lot of times, I think we decide who Jesus probably was based on what we think the church should be. But each of the goals is valid and grounded, both in history and in philosophical and pragmatic arguments. But there's one more model that describes what we can be that I want to talk about, because it's a model that resonates with me, and I think it's a model that offers us a sense of growth and deepening that we could use here. Writers have described it as a community of disciples. The idea is not, I want to be clear about this, that members become disciples of the minister. The idea is that we together as a community live out our faith in a pretty radical way. In that historical Christian context, being a disciple meant taking on a pretty strict lifestyle. Those rules were so different that they became really visible to the outside world as a countercultural movement. Here at Tapestry, we're not so intense about rules exactly, but we do expect beliefs to extend beyond Sunday morning. We encourage our members to cultivate a lifestyle that resonates with our ethical and religious commitments. And when we do that, when we boldly live out our Unitarian Universalist principles, we stand in pretty sharp contrast to South Orange County. And sometimes, hopefully, people notice that. People notice that there's a different way of being in the world, and they want to join that movement. Discipleship is more about being a leader in the wider community than it is about building institutions. Not everyone is going to join our ranks or take up the challenge of living in a religious community. Not everyone is ready to be at the center of a countercultural movement, but some are. We're participating in just this sort of leadership in one very clear way at Tapestry. You've probably heard of Friends of Orange County Detainees. It's one of our gyms. Every week, volunteers offer a lifeline of hope to immigrants who are held in detention centers in Orange County. A short visit from another human being means the world to them. It's a soul-saving message of hope. And very literally, Friends of Orange County Detainees is now saving lives. Just this past week, the organization was able to find a sponsor in Orange County for a transgendered woman from El Salvador. Without a sponsor, a stable home to go to, she would have lingered in jail indefinitely, or been deported back to her country to face extreme danger and possibly death. Through loving connections, we saved a woman's life last week. And it had nothing to do with making more Unitarian Universalists or building a budget. The goal of discipleship is not to create more Unitarian Universalists necessarily. The goal is to help all people to live out their values in the world. Creating some UUs along the way would be nice. If along the way people find themselves drifting into this community of disciples, great. Being a community of disciples is all about supporting one another, to live our faith boldly, to improve the world around us and enrich our own spirit along the way. It's about living boldly. If only there were a quick and easy description of what it looks like to live a Unitarian Universalist faith boldly. Do you all remember back in the 1990s? I was steeped in this as a youth in Oklahoma, but there was this explosion of bracelets and t-shirts and hats, all with the letters WWJD. Can someone tell me what those letters stood for? All together now. What would Jesus do? It was a simple and great question. The campaign was hugely popular. We still remember it. Most of us only know it from bracelets and t-shirts and those 4 letters of the 1990s, but it was actually a revival of a much earlier peak in popular evangelical Christianity. Back in 1896, Charles Sheldon wrote a widely popular book called In His Steps. It sold 30 million copies, one of the most popular books of all time. It's actually a fun read. It's obviously a little bit dated, but it's a charming book. It tells the story of a small town that took to heart the goal of following in his steps and asking every day, what would Jesus do? Now, far beyond the easy answers of neon-colored bracelets, the townspeople really grappled with living their faith that they were called to. And it created huge levels of conflict. Conflict within families that disagreed how they should treat one another. Conflict in the wider town. I know the issue of homelessness was there being confronted. And conflict in the church. Some of them split. It was nasty. In 1890, the simple question, what would Jesus do, captured the attention of countless people. It made them think seriously about living their faith. And in the same thing in 1990, the question was raised, albeit in a very simplistic fashion. So where does that leave us as UUs? On a daily basis, if we want to put our faith into action, the WWJD bracelet is not going to be the best reminder for most of us. Without a single moral instruction, without one specific religious text to hold on to as our guide, how might we focus on living our faith boldly? I wasn't able to whittle it down to one really good question with an acronym, but I have 3 questions that might help. First is, what do you believe deep down? Second, how do your actions correspond with those beliefs? And third, how does that impact the web of life? You'll hear me bring these 3 questions up a lot in the next year, I think. It's not quite as catchy as what would Jesus do, but it's a sincere framework for living faithfully as Unitarian Universalists. What do you believe deep down? How do your actions correspond with those beliefs, and how does that impact our web of life? You know, when I say, what do you believe deep down, I mean, what do you know to be true in your mind and in your heart? It's not enough to reduce life to a logic game, as if that kind of truth could be determined by a spreadsheet. And it's not enough just to feel your way through either, without doing some research and serious thinking. What do you believe deep down demands seeking truth as a whole person, a whole thinking, feeling, loving human being. My aim is to draw us into some balance in those 3 questions, like a tripod. Each one of those questions is necessary for boldly living our Unitarian Universalist faith. What do you believe deep down? How are you acting on those beliefs? And how do they impact the web of life? After all, this is pretty much what we strive for in our religious education program. We shoot for something higher than critical thinking, and something much more complicated than stamping our children with the Unitarian Universalist brand. We're hoping to give them the tools to boldly live their faith and to explore the world. And the education doesn't end with our children. We have a couple of small groups bubbling up at Tapestry. Each one of them is a tremendous opportunity to ask those three questions. One of those groups is a discussion that's grown out of reading the book, The New Jim Crow. The members of that discussion group have decided to continue meeting to raise their own consciousness of race and learning about racial injustices here in America. They're asking some incredibly hard questions of themselves, not just about systemic injustice. They're asking hard questions about what they believe deep down about race and how their actions are reflecting those beliefs. And they're trying to mend a web of life that takes race seriously. Another exciting movement that's bubbling up at Tapestry is our Green Sanctuary program. Two of our most dynamic leaders are planning sort of a reboot of Green Sanctuary. It's a program that draws our attention to environmental issues. It'll invite us into considering those questions. Deep down, what do we believe about our Earth? How do our actions reflect those beliefs? And how do our beliefs and actions connect us to a web of life? Even though I've been reading about it for a couple of months, I don't think there's any perfect model for the thriving religious community or to measure what doing it right looks like. But on Thursday evening, a few of us went and saw what it looks like in person. A few Tapestry members and I attended a prayer vigil at Christ Our Redeemer African Methodist Episcopal Church in Irvine. It was a vigil to gather in prayer and mourning after the terrorist shooting that occurred in South Carolina. There were probably 150 people there. I think 17 different clergy members offered their prayer. And they spoke of sadness and broken hearts. They prayed for the families of victims. They spoke of God's healing power, and they spoke of love and forgiveness. They prayed for the family of the shooter. The love of that community was so incredibly clear that evening. In reflecting on an act of terror against their sister congregation, they mourned and they spoke of love and forgiveness. They prayed for the family of the shooter and they mourned for the soul of the perpetrator and his awful act. After the vigil, a small group of us hung out and were chatting, and Pastor Mark Whitlock, who's the senior minister there at the church, said something that was particularly striking to me. He said, "That young man picked the wrong church." I didn't know quite what he was getting at, but he clarified. He said, "He picked the wrong church. We will never be afraid to worship. We will not be afraid to praise God, ever. He picked the wrong church. We will not be afraid." I hope and I believe that we will have the same courage to live out our faith at Tapestry. I believe that we have the courage to live our faith boldly. After some bumpy moves and ministerial transitions and staff transitions and splits and mergers and attempted mergers, Tapestry's been through a lot. But now we have an opportunity to do more than confront problems. As a community, Tapestry is poised to make a tremendous step forward. We have an amazing staff, absolutely amazing. We have a lovely facility. It's a little small, but it is lovely. And we have tremendous leaders in our midst, people who give countless hours. You blow me away. People of all different ages. We have what it takes. We have an opportunity to live our faith boldly, to be a community of disciples, a community that gets noticed not for its advertising campaign, for posters or postcards, but a community that gets noticed for its deep commitment to loving the hell out of the world. Amen.
We extinguish this flame, knowing that the light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts until we are together again.
Would you please take the hand of someone near you for this short benediction? I send you out now to share yourselves with the world. May its promise and complexity set your mind ablaze. May you hold fast to what your life has taught you. May you question everything. And when the world has changed you, and you have changed the world, may you return to this place again and share with us what you've learned along the way. Now go in peace and let the light within you be a blessing to the world.